Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. Today's date, it's Saturday. No, it's Friday. March 12th of 2021. And it is, in 3 minutes, 7 p.m. here in Fort Worth, Texas. I've made a few changes. That's not surprising, is it? I make a change every day. My room is a disaster. I should show it to you because I had to move everything to find stuff and to put stuff away. And so my wide monitor that was, here for 2 days on my desk, I have it on the bed right now because then I'm going to set it down on the floor over there in the corner. I dug out 3 or 4 light things that someplace I have the umbrella part that diffuses the light. I'm going to set that up for better lighting, although this Logitech Brio does great in low light level. So I'm back using my ViewSonic monitor in 1980 by 1020 mode. What else? Well, the microphone has been, the Wave, or the Elgato microphone has been moved right here, right in front of me. So you may hear keys clicking because it's 1 inch from the keyboard. We'll have to see how that works out. What else? I think that's probably it. Well, let's check. Let's see what the CNN. I had to change the resolution, desktop resolution, because of the monitor that I was using, and all I did was change the resolution back to 1920 by 1080, but now some of my browsers, or maybe all of them, are I think they sort of think that this is a new install or something, where they're pro-Trump organizer alleges Alex Jones threatened her. Pro-Trump organizers allege Alex Jones, not organizers, pro-Trump organizer alleges that Alex Jones threatened her. Okay, that makes sense. Police are investigating an they're investigating report that the conspiracy theorist threatened to push a March for Trump official off an event stage. And I don't think that's anything new. He does stuff like that all the time. Trump's latest defense secretary blames Trump for the Capitol riot. It says here that Capitol riot prosecutors may charge more than 400 people, and plea deals may come within a few weeks. Thank God. I don't think we want to, the people who killed the police officer, the people who were, beating the police officer, or even assaulting, that should be, because if you're going to assault an armed police officer and beat them with a police shield, or beat them with a fire extinguisher and the various things that were happening, if they'll do that to a police officer, then they'll do that to anybody. And you need to have a place, where you draw the line and say, we're not going to tolerate this. Now, I'm a liberal, by the way, Democrat. I would also, I believe the line should be, and this would get some people who are out maybe legitimately protest. Well, they go too far sometimes. I'd say that also, and it happened at the Capitol, by the way. Somebody started a fire. I think if you set a structure on fire, we love the olden days, cowboys, and it wasn't the way we watch these John Wayne movies and all that type of stuff, and they're great, and all the other movies. There's a lot of movies better than John Wayne movies, but we watch these stories of the old, the TV shows, Matt Dillon and all that kind of stuff. We think that's history and the way things were. Now, back in the Old West, maybe not in every town, but with, drunken cowboys who had been out, driving a herd of cattle, across the United States or doing various things. When they came into town, to civilization or whatever, and they got drunk, and it was pretty bad. So towns generally, when you came to town, you had to turn in your gun, lock up your gun, or maybe they did it at, at the bar, some way, but that's not what we as Americans think, I read someplace that a couple cowboys going out and, into the street and, walking towards each other and drawing and firing, and, that was pretty rare. And, but anyway, we need to have, now I'm not saying go back and, but we should start with this Capitol situation. But there should be certain things we don't. And one of them, like number one, should be that you don't attempt to, create insurrection and bring down the government of the United States. Two, we watched, Gettysburg, the movie Gettysburg, that showed the good guys on the one side and the good guys on the other side, and honor and integrity and courage and that type of stuff. And then after the Civil War, this legend, this look what happened, things went back, in the South to the states passing laws that clearly were unconstitutional, and then look at the number of lynchings, and that type of stuff. So, maybe what we should have done is, just hung a bunch of the, I know, well, like everybody likes Robert E. Lee. Not everybody, but, people like Robert E. Lee for various reasons and for ways was portrayed in the movies and in history even. And I read the, Ulysses S. Grant's book. Luckily he finished the book. He was dying of throat cancer because he smoked cigars, I guess, so much. But luckily he got it finished, and that could supply some money for his family. But he wrote in the book, at the Appomattox and the surrender of Robert E. Lee in the South, or whatever. He wrote about that, Ulysses S. Grant, and he lavished. He explained in the book, that Ulysses S. Grant was in a private's uniform that was dirty, and because he just come off the battlefield out there, whatever, and he showed up, and Robert E. Lee was already there, in a magnificent officer's uniform, and just everything, the way it was all conducted, and it's sort of just, we liked that. We liked it that Ulysses S. Grant, said that the officers could keep their swords. I think that they could have kept maybe also their revolvers or whatever, and that the Southerners whose if the horse was theirs, they could take the horse home with them after the surrender, because they needed the horse to go home and plow the fields and that type of everything. It was just, that was tremendous slaughter and all that type of stuff, but that established, but maybe it was a mistake, because look what happened, as still happening, going on. I don't have the answers. Just things should get better. Let's see what else is going on here in the news. Minneapolis City Council approves $27 million settlement to the Floyd estate. The city's paying that. Well, we need, Republicans, well, of course, if it helps them, they like it, but Republican politicians or whatever, they don't like people to be able to sue. A doctor can be careless and cut off your leg, the wrong leg, that or take out the wrong eye, or can do something that kills your child. And Republicans, politicians, don't think that anybody should be able to sue, and in the 50 states, they've done everything they can to make it where you really can't sue. That in the state, though, they've, maybe not all of them, but as many as they could, they've made it so, Republican politicians have made it so you can't collect a large amount of money. Now, it might be sort of a large amount of money, but not a large enough amount of money that you can get a lawyer to do it for you. They've very smartly, Republicans have been very smart about, and I admit I've been guilty in the past of thinking, it's just a state legislature, it's just a school board, and it's just, and I'm not the only one that's done that. A lot of people have done that, and you think of, well, this is important. I'm voting for the president and vice president. I'm voting maybe for the governor. You might think, I'm voting for the governor. But all those other things, you just kind of, it's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal, and the Republicans have been very smart, and the born-again Christians have been very smart too about school board elections and things like that. They get in there, and then they can, if you take them, they can decide that To Kill a Mockingbird is not something that should be read by kids, or just all that type of stuff. But I had a point, and now I don't know what my point was. But it was, yeah. So what Republicans have done in this, I already mentioned that, I think. Let me say it again, because I'm not sure I said it. They've set the level of money that you can get in a lawsuit to a amount of money that you're not going to be able to go to a lawyer and say, hey, and your case can be, it can be blatantly, it can be clearly, that this doctor or whoever it is did something major, wrong. The person was incompetent. The person was deliberately did it and said, well, fuck you. Sue. Go ahead and sue me. We got more lawyers in the police department than you. And then you go try to find a lawyer, and you go to the lawyer, and the lawyer says, well, especially for a medical case, but it could be other stuff too, smoking or whatever it could be, or cigarettes, and you go and the lawyer says, I can't take your case, and because I would have to call in and pay for experts to come in to testify, and I would have to have depositions and have people travel to another state to get the depositions, and then they would have to do, it would cost me X amount of money. And although you have a great case, it would cost me a ton of money, and if I didn't win, I'd be out of business. I wouldn't be a lawyer anymore, because I'd have to let my staff go. I'd have to shut down couldn't afford the rent, where in the past, a lawyer could take the case. A lawyer could say, okay, you got a case here, and this person, what they've done is just unbelievable, and they need to be, they need to be paid for the damages that they did to you, and they need to pay so much money that other people are going to think before they do something like that. And so I'll pay for everything, and then I take X amount of money, and then you get the rest of the money. They could do that. Now it's harder to do that. Now think about the cases. I happen to work at a hospital where there was I'm not sure I was working there then. I think I was working at the other hospital that was on. Anyway, that's where a pharmacist, now he wasn't the hospital pharmacist, but he was in the medical building, or in the hallway leading to the medical building. He had his pharmacy, and he diluted the chemotherapy treatments. People would go there to get their, I don't know whether it was an injection. I don't think it was an injection so much as maybe the person had a port, and they, but he diluted it. So X number of patients, died because they weren't getting the real stuff. He was, that stuff is very expensive. I think, did somebody tell me, I think my ex-wife, she had, I think it was $6,000 a treatment. But anyway, he got caught because a pharmaceutical salesman or whatever, came, how they come by. You'll be in a doctor's office, and you're in the waiting room. You've been, you're waiting in the waiting room, and then you see somebody come in who's a pharmaceutical representative, and the staff just opens the door for them that's locked, unlock, press the button, unlock the door, let them go in. Or you can even be back in the treatment room, and if they've left the door open, you'll see the pharmaceutical salesman, and it's not like one, they have a lot for everything, and they show up, and you're wanting to have the doctor see you, but he's out there, and the pharmaceutical salesman is telling, him, hey, we've got this new, stuff that grows hair, or, I don't know, makes your penis harder, or, whatever it is. And here's some free samples, and here's such and such for, for you and all your staff, and it's gotten, and I don't think it's changed, but supposedly it has. The pharmaceutical people would go and they'd say, well, Dr. Smith, if you sign up your patients who become diabetic, and you sign up and use our medication for that, for every, I don't know what the number would be, it depends on how much, like for every 25 people that you sign up to use for the rest of their life our insulin or whatever the medication is, for every 25 you and that you sign up, because that's expensive, and I'm a type 2 diabetic, and take the medicine twice a day, not injectable, but just take the pill, but I mean it's expensive. Well, the testing strips are expensive too, and all that kind of stuff. So those, what they've said in the past is, okay, I don't know if the numbers are, I'm just making the number up, but okay, for every 25 people that you sign up, for the strips and the diabetic medication, you and your wife will get a trip to Hawaii. Or, and that it was things like that. And I'm not sure if it was the FDA or which agency, they came along and said, okay, that you can't do that anymore. But I'm sure that doctors and the pharmaceutical representatives have found a way to get around that. One way I know is, and for X number of years, my blood sugar was, man, my leg is really leaking. My blood sugar was high, very high, but I wasn't a diabetic. It was just a few more points and I was a diabetic. And the doctor I was going to, now, I was partially to blame. I mean, I should have done whatever was necessary. I should have become a vegetarian or did whatever was necessary to make sure that I didn't go, but I didn't. I just continued to eat and drink, and so anyway, then every time I'd, every 6 months when I'd go see the doctor, he'd have blood work done, and, oh, you're so close, you're going to be a diabetic, and it was like, you're going to be a diabetic. And then I came in one day and he did had done the lab work. Okay, I'd moved the 10 points or whatever, and I was a diabetic. And he says, okay, you're a diabetic. Now let me go get the stuff for you. And he goes and gets the strips, from such and such a company, and the lances to, and the little thing to shoot the little needle in my arm, and all this kind of, gets all that kind of stuff. He came back with it and then gave me the prescription, of course, for the stuff. He was so happy, he could hardly contain himself. And I'm not sure what he got, but I mean, so we do need regulations, and that's another thing that, we need regulations, but we don't want regulations, more regulations than we need, but we want regulations. Things need to be regulated, things need to be checked. And there's a big divide in the country if people could just be reasonable and try to be intelligent and not lock on to conspiracy theories. And now somebody's going to say, oh, you've got a conspiracy theory against, doctors or against pharmaceutical salesmen, or, not true. What else did I... Here's a woman describes getting an empty shot of the COVID vaccine. I don't know. Maybe I'll read the thing later. Well, no. How does she know that it was empty? I mean, is she a nurse or something? Oh, accidentally. Okay. Woman describes getting an empty shot of the vaccine when she was told she was one of the customers at the Virginia clinic who accidentally received an empty shot. Things happen. That's why, of course now with the virus, they don't want people just in the hospital unless you need to be there. I mean, if family and that type of stuff, which is absolutely tragic. And also, you need to have, if you have somebody in the hospital, especially if it's a child, but anybody, or if somebody's old, somebody needs to be in there with them, kind of looking out for them, making sure they don't get the wrong medication, just making sure things don't happen. Our oldest child, a grown person now. Well, when she was a baby, some friends of ours came over. They had a baby a few weeks before our baby was born. In fact, I just remembered that, yeah. I worked at the hospital with this guy. He was a security officer at this hospital, and I worked there with him. And he got married and had a baby just shortly. The wives were talking, but then they came over, and then they were asking, like, what are you going to name, the baby when it comes? And they hadn't had theirs yet. And finally, Darlene, and she thought about it a lot, and Darlene was going to name our girl Heather, and our last name is Howard. Heather Howard. Sounded nice. It sounded nice to me. And so Darlene told Diane and her husband, we're thinking we're going to go with Heather, for Heather Howard. And so when their baby was born, a girl, shortly before ours was born, they named their girl Heather. Heather, their last name was Winship, Heather Winship. So Darlene didn't name ours Heather, named her LaDonna. But anyway, they came over with their baby, and ours had been born. And they came in, and we had a few snacks, a few drinks, not alcoholic drinks, I don't know. Probably, all I drink is Coke. But anyway, they came over, and then they asked if they could put the Heather down in the LaDonna's crib. And I'm not sure we really said yes. I would, because anyway, so they put her in the crib, and she was in the crib for a while. You know, LaDonna wasn't in the, you know, the crib, but Heather was. And then they started telling us that Heather had a cold and a fever and all this kind of stuff. And then, you know, then they left. And my then wife, now ex-wife, you know, changed the sheets and all that stuff on the crib and everything. And then a few days later, LaDonna came down with a respiratory, you know, infection, and we went to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician admitted her. So, so they put LaDonna on medication, and she was getting, I don't think it was, I think it was, wasn't breathing treatments, I think it was like mist, or I can't remember exactly now. It's been, I don't know, 50 years or more, something like that. So anyway, the next day, the hospital, LaDonna was supposed to go home. The next day, the hospital said, no, we made a mistake. And they, you know, they told us, we made a mistake. LaDonna was supposed to be on, I'm just making, I forget what it was, supposed to be on, let's say, cool mist or something or other. But instead they put her on warm mist or whatever. And she was, you know, and for that she had to stay an extra day or whatever. So, LaDonna, by the way, was born at a Jewish hospital, Menorah Hospital. And when we got her bill, I looked through the bill, and they charged for a circumcision. So, but yeah, people do need to be, you need to have somebody there with you to watch out, because you may be old, you're a patient in the hospital, you may be, maybe have been medicated and you don't know, stuff like that. So anyway, okay, enough. This is sort of a test, because for this I used Manicam again. I had to reinstall it because I formatted this computer. This chair, by the way, is also, that's not why my leg is oozing fluid out. My God, does it look bad? Both of them, and my feet. I got to tell that story. I have told it before. My oldest daughter, LaDonna, and her husband are both vegans. They don't eat meat and cheese and certain, you know, eggs. I thought, I don't know, and I don't know how they survive. Anyway, I went there for 2 weeks. I never had been to the northeast part of the United States. I had never been to Washington, D.C. If you watch my videos, you know I'm a history buff and a political, and I have been my entire life. I remember when I was in grade school watching the Kefauver hearings and all this type of stuff as a kid. And so I've seen all the movies and TV shows and everything about Washington, D.C. and the news every day. And I'd seen the White House and the Capitol building and all that type of stuff. So never had been to Washington, D.C. And LaDonna and her husband invited me, and I went for 2 weeks. I've got some videos here of that. But I went for 2 weeks, and at that time, my my legs were swollen grossly, and my feet. And so, for 2 weeks, I did have some trouble getting around, but I wasn't as bad as I am now. But they asked me how I wanted to do it, and I said, how about every other day, we go out. And so it worked out about every other day. We went out and walked for about 3.5 hours around Washington, D.C. and museums and that type of stuff. And for the 2 weeks I was there, except for a couple of times, I ate their food. And so I was just there for 2 weeks. I'd say about a week and a half at that point, I could tell I'd lost weight, because I could put up my pants and do that type of stuff. And my legs and my feet had returned to like a normal people's legs and feet. And when I left there, my legs were not swollen, my feet were not swollen. And then I went back to Texas, and I forget how long it took, but my feet went back to being swollen and legs swollen. So why am I not a vegetarian? I should be. Although, don't know. Anyway, if you're not diabetic yet, hey, try to make sure you don't, do whatever necessary. Even, oh God, I think you could still, if it's not a religion to you, you know what I mean, just, have a McDonald's once a week, or have, and by the way, in the beginning when my daughter became a vegetarian and visited a few times, and she would bring vegetarian hot dogs and vegetarian hamburgers, and the stuff was gross. You could not eat that crap. And she thought, she said, oh no, it's almost, whatever. But then she learned. She's also smart, by the way. I can say that because she didn't get it from me. But when I was there, and for a long time, of course, before I went there, the food was really good, and that they made. And they told me that there was this one place, a restaurant near them, and that it was a vegetarian restaurant, and they only served vegetarian food. And I said, they're going to go out of business. And anyway, we went, and they knew what they wanted. LaDonna ordered the same thing when they go there that she ate, and Aaron, her husband, he ordered the same thing that he did. And I ordered, I forget what they called it, but it was a little bit of a whole bunch of different things, different things that I got. And it was all delicious. And of course I shared it, and then they were like, wow. Next time, they were saying, like, next time we come, we're going to get, this, because they had the certain thing that but what was amazing, they only served vegetarian food there. And I had 5 or 6 different things, smaller samples. I didn't eat 5 or 6 meals, and it was good. It was best food I've had. And, I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, where we have the best barbecue in the entire United States. But, so, I don't know why we're not eating vegetarian food. I think it takes a little more effort. Well, I know it does, because when I was there, LaDonna and her husband, I was in the kitchen visiting with them, you know, they were a team. You know, somebody's cutting up the vegetables, somebody's cutting up the stuff, somebody's doing this and doing that or whatever. A couple of times when I was there, I did go out and get, right up the street was a mall about 2 or 3 blocks away. I went over there once and had Chinese food, I think. And then there was about a block away, and I forget, it wasn't a McDonald's, but it was something, you know, I don't know, Jack in a Box or whatever it was, and I went and got a hamburger and fries or something. So in that 2 weeks, twice did I, that's a word of advice for me. If you're pre-diabetic, or what do they call it? There was 2 terms. Some doctor, like, you know, told me I was pre-diabetic, and then some doctor said, I forget what he said, but it was that area right before the number kicks over, you know. Some of the doctors or medical people call it such and such, and then I think some of the others say, no, it shouldn't be called that, it should be called, and so, but it was basically, I was just, and that just shows how dumb I am, but I think it shows how dumb a whole bunch of Americans are. Anyway, if you're young, you know, exercise, do whatever necessary, you know, eat the right foods. I'm going to be 80 here this month. Wait a minute. Yeah, I'm going to be 80. I'll drink to that. That was a joke. Supposed to be ironic. I worked my entire life. I never was without a job. Worked a whole bunch of different jobs. People who watch my videos think I maybe just worked as a security officer for 30 years. No, my wife and I had a couple businesses. One was a tropical fish shop. The other was a patrol service. I worked as a welder, boilermaker. I built railroad cars, built trucks, worked at building an oil refinery, worked for the mafia, and not as a hitman or anything like that. They had their, you know, worked for a couple different mafia people. Post office for a short period of time, United States Post Office. And I always worked. You know, I quit the post office, I think, on a Friday, and on Monday I had a job. I was a welder, and they needed welders, and I just went over and went to work, you know. And sometimes I had 2 jobs, you know, working full-time hospital security and working part-time contract security on my days off, you know, Saturday and Sunday or whatever, 12-hour shifts, stuff like that. But I made some mistakes financially, you know, at least twice, maybe 3 times, when I quit a place that I had worked for a long time. I cashed in the tax-sheltered annuity and spent it. I remember one time I spent it for computer stuff. Not smart. I sold a domain name, Howard.net, for $10,000, and I bought some computer stuff in a car, and so as I made mistakes financially, you know. I've talked about that a few times, you know. If you're a young person and it may be rough nowadays, I'm sure it is, but save 10% of all the money you get, you know, save 10% of that, you know, put that someplace. I don't know where you'd put it. You can't put it in a bank and get a, you know, maybe buy what, I don't know, but save 10%. And then, you know, hopefully you get a union job so you can have a living wage, but probably you won't, because Republicans don't want unions. They think they're communist or something. I was in the United Auto Workers Union. I was in the Boilermakers Union. United Auto, Boilermaker. I think that's it. My father and mother were both in the Boilermakers Union. My mother, because at that time, World War II, I was a baby out in California. And we weren't all three in the Boilermakers Union at the same time. My father and I were, but anyway, during World War II, my mother worked not as Rosie the Riveter, but she was a welder. And my father was a welder building Liberty ships. And then after the war, we went back to Missouri, and my mother worked various, you know, women-type jobs, you know. And then she went to nursing school and became a nurse. And my father, he came back, and he stayed in the union, and eventually became a union official. So I ended up being in the, you know, the union. And by the way, in case you're thinking or whatever, he never did anything to help me, and I never asked him to ever do anything to help. I never asked for, you know, I wouldn't do that, and he wouldn't do that. And by the way, my father was, you know, because of the age that he was racist. Of course, who wasn't back then? I wasn't, but who wasn't, you know, that was white, wasn't racist. But when he became a union official, they had shop jobs that paid less money as a Boilermaker. And then they had field jobs where the union covered the 4 states, that local 83 covered 4 states, and those jobs where you went out and they paid a lot more money, better money. And the union, no black person, you know, they were all white. And my dad said, no, that they're brothers, you know. Because like the shop jobs, they were, you know, we were black and white and Hispanic or whatever, and we didn't make as much money. But so people working the shop jobs, a lot of them Boilermakers, you know, union members wanted to go on field, you know, into that area where they were going on field jobs and making more money. And I never asked my father, and he never, you know, but my father insisted that because we were union members, and if you were black, you know, you were a union member. And my father said, you know, they're brothers, and so he insisted. And then later, when they came up with the apprenticeship program, unions did, some legislation was passed, and I think the Department of Labor maybe administered it or whatever, that allowed, of course, Republicans, you know, fought it and tried to throw monkey wrenches into it or whatever, so that a person, the union could set up an apprenticeship program. They had to follow certain rules and stuff to make sure it wasn't just, you know, a scam or something. And so a young person, I mean, not a high school kid or something, you know, but an adult, a young person could become an apprentice. They had to be selected and become an apprentice, and then they were kept as far as possible working, like on these field jobs. And so the reason they had to have the regulations or whatever is, you know, you didn't want somebody being an apprentice and learning and going out on a job and they did the same thing, you know, maybe just welding or just using the acetylene torch or just, you know, so they had to, and so they had to have these rules and regulations so that when an apprentice went out, you know, they would say, okay, well, the apprentice, he's going to be learning, you know, to use the acetylene torch. He's going to be learning at this job or whatever. He's going to learn to do, you know, arc welding. Okay, he's going to learn blueprint reading. Okay, he's going to learn, you know, and that type of stuff. So that by the time they were done, then they were a hell of a, you know, hell of an employee, because when they showed up on a job, they had learned everything. So my no black was an apprentice, and my father then said, you know, first he was like, okay, they have to be able to go on, you know, have to be on where they can go on field jobs. We can't discriminate against them. And then it was like, okay, the apprenticeship program came along. They have to be, and my father talked about him, you know, as, you know, he'd say, you know, a brother, you know, union member. So, but then some of the things he would say, you know, he wouldn't watch, there was some TV show that, now part of some of the stuff that he did, I think, was just to rile up his wife. But there was some TV show that he wouldn't watch because there was a black person on it or something. It might have been Archie Bunker, All in the Family, which would be kind of strange. I don't know if it was that or not. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, enough. Thank you for watching.